Newcastle's importance in the 1600s to Britain's industrial history is pretty poorly understood, and yet it was really important in terms of the development of the coal industry and also the lead industry. And in particular, the lead industry is pretty little known about, and yet in the 1660s about 400 tons of lead were exported from Newcastle to various places around Europe. Within 15 years, by 1676, it was nearly 2,000 tons. It was a dramatic increase by the standards of the 1600s, about five-fold increase in just 15 years. Now, this was all dominated by one man who only exported a fraction of the total in the 1660s. By 1676, William Blackett was responsible for 3/4 of the lead being exported from Newcastle. In other words, he was responsible for nearly all of the huge growth in that industry in that time. So who was he? Blackett seemed to come from nowhere. I mean, he has a pretty obscure background. He was an apprentice to the Company of Merchant Adventurers, which controlled the trade in Newcastle right through to the 1600s. And he started his apprenticeship right at the time when a bubonic plague hit Newcastle, which would have really been a traumatic experience for a 15-year-old boy, probably living in his master's house under lockdown on the big market at the time. But he clearly made an impression during his apprenticeship, and he was taken on, although he was from fairly humble circumstances, into a trading family when he gained his freedom and was therefore allowed to trade in the mid-1640s. And that's what he was for about 10 years. He was a trader. Most people in Newcastle who were merchants and traders were selling cloth over to continental Europe and importing flax and rye and material for making sailcloth for ships, and he made a reasonable living from that through the 1650s. But then, at the very end of the 1650s, there was a big change, and he invested probably 2/3 of his capital, his money, in coal mining and lead mining ventures. He took a share in the Stella Grand Lease coal mine, sort of just up from Bladen really, in 1660. And then at around the same time, he took a real gamble, a real risk in taking a lead mining lease out in Allen Heads, far away to the south from here, to take a trial on lead. There were only 9 years left on this lease that he'd bought out, 9 years in which to get his money back. And lead was a gamble in two ways. Firstly, the lead veins could run out. There may be no more lead left to raise. Secondly, it depended upon the markets remaining buoyant, and lead was a very volatile trade. It was really important to the building industry. It also went into lead in bullets, and of course this was just coming out of the Civil War, which was quite a busy time in Newcastle. And so, but it was used in lead. For flashing on roofs, it was the only really malleable and waterproof metal that you could work. Blackett got a really big break because in 1666 there was the Great Fire of London, and a lot of the lead that was on the main principal buildings in London melted beyond reuse, whereas lead you could normally bash it back into shape and use it again. So Blackett got lucky in that there was a huge demand for lead from London, and and the export of lead to Europe in that dramatic 15-year period when it really increased was what really made his fortune. He also had a number of coal mining interests around Newcastle, and he was the governor of the Hostman's Company in Newcastle in the 1660s, and then again in a later period. But he made enough money to buy the grandest house in Newcastle in 1675. He became the mayor of the town. He was elected as its MP and was knighted by King Charles II. And in a rarity for Charles II, Blackett didn't have to buy his knighthood. Normally it was cash for honours, and you normally had to buy your way into the peerage and into having a knighthood. Blackett didn't have to do that, and it was a hereditary baronetcy which has extended right down through his family to the present day. So he really made his mark in a fairly short period of time, and it was lead that that it was done through. And he ran an astonishingly large business. At its peak, he probably employed or was responsible for the employment of over 700 people in trading and in lead and in coal. The only large organisations at the time really were the naval shipyards, and one or two of the coal mines perhaps may have employed 100 or 200 people. But he was managing that number of people across 3 different businesses in trade and in lead and in coal, which was remarkably large for its time. And we haven't really appreciated that until now. It's also a business that stayed together. Most businesses at the time didn't outlast their founder. He handed over his business to his 2 sons. They carried it forward, and the Blackett lead business remained in operation in one form or another until the 1920s. So it was an extraordinarily long period of time, much earlier than people have normally given credit for large-scale businesses in Britain. It must have had a huge impact on just the rise of management capability, which was one of the contributions that Newcastle made to the development of the British economy in the 1600s, in the 1700s, in the run through to the Industrial Revolution. We tend not to look back on that as one of the high points of Newcastle's development, because it was so overlain by the later development of railways, with the Stephensons, with the huge growth of the coal industry, the steel industry, locomotive works and so on. So most of what you see in Tyneside today as a legacy from the industrial years of the city's history is from the 19th century, and understandably so. There's less that we see from the era of Blackett and his people in the 17th century. And yet, this is one of them, the bridge over the Tyne at Corbridge. For a long time, it was the only bridge over the Tyne for long stretches, but the bridge that was built in the 1200s was in ruins by the 1600s. It was still the only bridge between the north bank of the Tyne and the south bank. Now, in 1667, there was a petition from the citizens of Newcastle to have the bridge rebuilt, because they claimed it was really important for trade from Newcastle westwards to Cumberland, Carlisle and back again. Well, maybe, although that's an east-west route. What the bridge really does is connect the north and the south banks. It will be very handy for somebody who at the time had a very productive lead mine, Fallowfield, about 3 or 4 miles up this way on the north bank of the Tyne, and a lead smelting mill, the largest in the country at Dukesfield, about 4 or 5 miles to the south. Now, if you needed to carry lead in pack horses over a river where this bridge is broken, the most direct route over at Hexham tended to rise and fall, and the petition claimed that many people were carried away each year by losing all of their goods and their lives in trying to ford the River Tyne. This petition, which was from the citizens of Newcastle, was calling upon Parliament to make sure that the justices in Newcastle who were responsible for the bridge were to rebuild it. So they took this petition to Parliament, it was upheld, and the Newcastle justices on the Northumberland county rates were asked to rebuild this bridge. And there's a plaque on the end of it that reads, it was rebuilt in 1674. Now, curiously, that of course was a major boost to somebody like Blackett, who was carrying huge amounts of lead ore from his mine to be smelted into lead metal at Dukesfield. So when I called up the original petition, which is in the Duke of Northumberland's archives in Alnwick, sure enough, discreetly, fourth from the bottom, was the signature of William Blackett. He had recently completed his term as the Mayor of Newcastle, and so he very quietly and very subtly got the Newcastle ratepayers to pay for the rebuilding of this bridge, which still stands here today, been widened, been refurbished, but this is the bridge from 1674, which was a real tribute to the political skills of William Blackett in getting someone else to pay for what was vital infrastructure for his business, and also a silent tribute to the dramatic impact that the lead industry made on Tyneside in the 1600s. One of the few that's left, together with 1 or 2 buildings. Within Newcastle itself, there's not a great deal left, not even his memorial stone in St Nicholas's Church. And so it's in places like this at Corbridge that we can really see the legacy of William Blackett and what the lead trade did for the town and helped it on its way to becoming one of the premier industrial cities of Britain in the Industrial Revolution.